The night was calm when the woman crossed the park, without imagining that it would be the last safe place in her life. For many, the park was a refuge, a peaceful and pleasant place to be. However, that night would be different. The man with the cold gaze, who emerged from the shadows like an invisible presence, waiting. He was called the Park Maniac, because he seduced women with his victims with sympathy, luring them to the darkest and most deserted parts, where no one could hear their screams. No one knew for sure who he was or where he came from, but there was one terrifying certainty. He attracted women with sympathy, and when they were already dominated, he took their lives. And now, that woman was alone. With every step, she felt a sinister presence around her. It was true. It really was there, watching, waiting for the exact moment to attack. In this tale of pure terror, prepare yourself to face the most primitive fear, the one that arises when we realize we are being hunted. And that, this time, there is no way out. The Park Maniac. It was a night like any other. An ordinary day, which I ended with my nightly walk in the park. I always went there after work to clear my head, listen to music and be alone for a while. I liked feeling the fresh air, the soft sound of the leaves, and the gentle swaying of the trees in the night breeze. I never imagined that it could turn into my worst nightmare. That night, as I was walking absent-mindedly, I noticed a shadow that seemed to be approaching with silent steps. I still didn't know who or what it was, but I felt a cold shiver running down my spine. I pretended not to notice and hurried my steps. My heart started beating faster, and that was when I heard a low, hoarse whisper coming from somewhere behind me. "Miss, can I help you with something?" It was a man, but his voice was heavy, threatening. I turned my face away, not wanting to look at him directly, with an instinct to flee already screaming in my head. But he was there, smiling strangely, his eyes fixed on me. He seemed empty, as if the darkness around us was part of him. "No, I'm fine," I said, trying to be polite, but my voice was shaking. I started walking faster, but I realized he was following me, keeping the same distance. I knew that at this hour there was no one else in the park, and fear began to grow like a fireball in my chest. I could hear my own footsteps echoing, the sound growing louder and louder, mixed with the sound of his footsteps right behind. Suddenly, he stopped and called out to me again. "Do you know why you're here?" His voice was louder, and his tone sounded like someone who had played this game many times before. It was then that I turned and saw him standing there, smiling in a way that seemed inhuman. He was holding something that glinted in the dim light of the street lamps. A knife. Small but deadly, with a long, thin blade. The metallic glint flashed toward me, and my throat closed up, panic consuming me. "Come on, I don't want to hurt you. If you cooperate," he said, as if it were a joke. Without thinking, I started running. I could hear his breathing and his hurried footsteps behind me. I ran with all my strength, but it seemed like the park was becoming a trap, every path a dead end. I was lost, surrounded by the night, by fear, and by him. When I felt his rough hands gripping my arm, I screamed. I screamed with all my strength, but the silence of the park drowned out my despair. He whispered in my ear, and his fetid breath made me even more disgusted. "No one ever escapes the maniac in the park," he murmured, squeezing my throat. My vision began to blur. I struggled, kicked, tried to free myself, but he was too strong. Just when I thought all was lost, I heard something. Footsteps, quick footsteps, and the scream of someone calling the police. The maniac hesitated, and I took advantage of that second of distraction to let go and run. I ran out of the park without looking back, until I finally found myself surrounded by lights and people. I was alive, but I could still feel his touch, his smell, his cold presence, like a shadow that would never leave me. Today, when I close my eyes, I can still see his face, his sadistic smile, and hear his whisper promising that one day he would find me again. Since that night, my life has changed. I thought I would be able to forget what happened, that it was only a matter of time until the night across the street. Each appearance was brief, just long enough for him to see me and smile before disappearing. I decided to move to another city, thinking that if I went far enough, maybe he wouldn't find me. I went to a place hundreds of miles away from where it all began. For a few days, it seemed like the nightmare was finally over. I began to breathe a sigh of relief, thinking I was safe. But then, one night as I was walking along the pavement, I passed a square and something made me stop. Under the yellow light of the street lamp, a silhouette appeared in the middle of the square. He was standing still with his back to me, and even without seeing his face, I knew who he was. My body froze in terror. He turned slowly, and there he was. The same empty gaze, the sadistic smile, as if he had never lost sight of me. "I told you that no one escapes me," he murmured. His voice made me nervous. I wanted to run, but my legs were looser. We started moving toward me, each step closer, each second deeper. I froze in place, expecting the worst. When I finally looked again, he had disappeared. Since then, I have lived with this curse. The fear grows realistic, sometimes just a shadow, at times moving, flesh and blood, like a ghost that will linger. I know that I am living in a countdown, waiting for the moment when he will finally reach me to finish what he started. This is my new reality, my new prison. Because the Park Maniac is not just a horror story. He is real. He is out there. And he is waiting, always waiting, to make me his eternal victim. The Maniac of the park was a real man. Tall, dark, and with a strong will that was frightening. His broad shoulders and strong legs, he was ready to kill anyone who ventured near him. The ceiling was dark, and he had no fear of phantoms or anything desperate rage. I would kill him to start a new chaos. His eyes were ghastly, and he had no sympathy for anyone. His eyes seemed to look for my attention, as if everyone was looking at him. When I fixed his gaze, I was attracted to it. It was as if he pierced the merciful, penetrating the depths of my person. The look of someone who is observing, the look of someone who is hunting, like a predator who takes pleasure in seeing fear grow and the woman he chose humiliated. His hand displayed a symbol, a warning, a sign, a gesture. Everything was disturbing. It was an eerie, surreal, sleeping thing that appeared at unexpected moments. His teeth, an almost frozen face, his voice, fierce. His large pointed nose is like the murderous knowledge that he knew how to seduce. At times terrifying. There was always a black lantern with lights that gave him constant unease, making him blend into the shadows of the park. In his strong, large hands he hid a thin, long blade, almost invisible in the darkness, but with a metallic shine that appeared in the most tense moments, shining like a promise of violence. When he moved, he did so silently, almost supernaturally. He could be just a few meters away and suddenly appear right behind you, without making a single sound. He was no ordinary man. He liked to see death, a figure that seemed to be part of the park itself, a predator that fed on the terror of unsuspecting women.